My name is Marissa. I'm 29 years old. The city outside was barely awake. Through the glass windows, the skyline of Sacramento was washed in that pale, milky light that comes right before the heat. Inside, the office felt too clean, too perfect. Rows of gray desks, fluorescent panels humming like nervous insects. The air smelled faintly of burnt coffee and disinfectant. Someone's Spotify playlist was whispering from a laptop speaker, low enough to blend with the clicking of keyboards. Then came the first ping, that innocent, cheerful Slack sound, the one that normally meant reminders, deadlines, memes. I remember how it sliced through the quiet. Then another ping, then 5, then 20. The rhythm shifted, quick and dissonant, like rain suddenly hitting a tin roof. Heads lifted, brows furrowed. Conversations halted mid-sentence. I was still by the elevator, clutching my travel mug, when the room changed. It was subtle at first. A pause here, a stifled laugh there. But the energy dropped like a curtain. I hadn't even reached my desk yet when I felt the silence crawling up the back of my neck. That kind of silence that doesn't come from peace, but from judgment. I rounded the corner by the kitchen. The microwave's low hum filled the air. Someone was stirring sugar into their coffee, the plastic spoon tapping the side of the cup in nervous repetition. That sound, it still sticks in my head. Then I saw Erin. She was sitting near the big ficus plant by the window, halfway through typing something. When she looked up and saw me, her fingers froze over the keys. Her expression changed instantly. Eyes wide, mouth slightly open, like she wanted to warn me but didn't know how. She didn't have to. My tote bag vibrated, once, twice, non-stop. I pulled out my phone. The Slack icon glowed red. A dozen unread messages. I opened it. There it was. A screenshot of my private messages, cropped, edited, stripped of context. The ones I'd sent to a close friend late one night, venting about burnout, frustration, and about him, Mark, my boss. Another ping, another screenshot, then a third. They weren't just shared, they were broadcasted, posted publicly in the team-wide channel. No explanation, no caption, just exposure. My words, twisted and served up for entertainment. My stomach turned cold. It took a moment to realize who had done it. Then I saw the username beside the post. Mark. The same Mark who had once told me I had a spark. The one who'd kept me late after meetings with a drink in his hand and a compliment on his tongue. The one who sent me messages at 11:37 p.m. "You still up?" and laughed it off the next morning as if it was a joke between professionals. He was the senior director of strategy, untouchable, charming when it suited him, cruel when no one was looking. And now he'd decided to make a joke out of me. Gasps rippled through the office. I saw the Slack reactions roll in like a slow-motion avalanche. Laughter emojis, a few shocked faces, but no one said anything, not a single word in my defense. Even HR, silent. I stood there, rooted to the floor, feeling the blood drain from my face. My pulse thudded, steady and heavy. My mind wasn't racing. It was slowing down, clearing, like when you know a storm's about to hit and you're suddenly calm in the eye of it. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I didn't even speak. I walked to my desk, the sound of my heels muffled by the carpet. The room felt colder than it had 10 minutes ago. I sat down, logged in, and waited. From the glass conference room, I heard his voice float out, smooth as ever. "Morning sink in 10. He didn't sound nervous. He didn't even sound smug. Just normal. Like none of this had happened. The door closed behind him. Around me, people avoided eye contact. Someone shifted papers unnecessarily. Another pretended to be on a call. It was worse than laughter, this pretending. They all wanted to act like they didn't know, like it wasn't happening. But I could feel their curiosity like static in the air. I took a breath and opened my browser. My fingers didn't shake. I knew exactly what I was looking for. The folder sat there in my cloud drive, just in case. Inside it were months of quiet preparation, digital receipts no one else knew existed, screenshots of inappropriate messages, voice recordings from late-night Zoom calls that went too far off topic, DMs saved and time-stamped. Audio clips where his tone crossed the line from mentoring to manipulation. Even a short video, his face, his voice, saying the words that would undo him. No one's gonna believe you if you take this to HR. I had never planned to use any of it. I'd told myself it was just for protection, just in case things went too far. But that morning, too far had already arrived. When the clock hit 9, I stood up and walked into the conference room. My heart was steady. I'd gone numb in the best possible way, focused, deliberate. Mark was standing at the whiteboard, scribbling numbers, KPIs, engagement metrics, stretch targets. He didn't look up when I entered. He didn't have to. He already believed I was beneath him. "Morning, Marissa," he said, casual without turning around. "Rough start today, huh?" I didn't answer. He smiled at the board as if amused by his own private joke. "Don't take slack so seriously. People share things, we laugh, we move on. Builds team culture." I could taste metal in my mouth. "Is that what this is?" He finally turned, eyes sharp. "Don't start dramatizing, okay? You know how these things spiral. I'd hate for HR to think you're unstable." That word hung in the air. Unstable. He knew exactly what he was doing. I opened my phone beneath the table, my thumb hovering over the send button. My message draft was already written, to HR, to legal, to the chief operating officer, and a copy to myself. Attached was a link, encrypted and time-stamped. Inside that folder was everything, every word, every sound, every line he had crossed. He was still talking, something about Q2 projections, something about maintaining our professional composure. I pressed send. The sound was almost nothing, just a soft whoosh, but it echoed in my chest like a detonator click. Mark didn't notice, not yet. He was too busy lecturing, pacing in front of the whiteboard like a man confident in his own reflection. I watched him, not with anger, but with something colder. Clarity. Outside the conference room, the office carried on, unaware that the current had already shifted. The laughter had died down. The Slack pings were gone, but something heavier had settled in their place. Anticipation. He leaned on the table, grinning faintly. "You'll be fine," he said. "Just keep your head down for a few days. Let the noise pass." I met his eyes. "Sure," I said quietly. He smiled wider, misreading the calm for surrender. The projector light flickered behind him, washing the wall with his own shadow. He didn't know it yet, but that shadow was about to stretch farther than he ever imagined. The fuse was already lit. The afternoon stretched thin, time moving like syrup dripping down glass. The sound of the clock on the far wall grew louder with every passing minute. Each tick was sharp, metallic, deliberate. The kind of sound that makes you aware of how still everything else is. The office looked unchanged. Same desks, same plants, same faces, but the air felt different. Too dense, too alert. No one spoke. Not a word, not a whisper. Even the sound of typing came in cautious bursts, like everyone was afraid to make noise. Every cough sounded forced. Every chair creak drew a few glances before eyes snapped back to screens. I kept mine on the spreadsheet in front of me, but I wasn't seeing numbers. I was watching reflections in the glass, watching Mark. He moved with his usual arrogance, straight-backed, hands in his pockets, that fake casual confidence of a man who thinks he's untouchable. He laughed with someone from analytics, clapped a hand on their shoulder, pretending to be the friendly mentor again. But his eyes flicked toward me twice. Each time, he smiled. When lunch rolled around, he passed by my desk. Steam curled from his mug, that smell of over-roasted espresso hitting before his words did. He leaned close, just enough that no one else could hear. "Next time," he said softly. "Watch what you text. You never know who's watching." His voice was smooth, conversational, like a reminder from a friend. But the smile, crooked, condescending, was pure threat. My nails pressed into my palm beneath the desk. The instinct to react burned in me, but I swallowed it. I turned my head just slightly enough to meet his eyes. "You're right," I said, voice steady. "You never do. He chuckled, low and satisfied, assuming victory. He couldn't see the current already moving beneath the surface, the one I'd set in motion. By 3 o'clock, the office light had shifted to that dull amber hue that comes through blinds in late afternoon. My computer pinged, a new email. The subject line felt like a held breath. Request for meeting. HR compliance time, 9 a.m. tomorrow. Location, conference room C. For a moment, I didn't move. My hand hovered above the mouse, the words staring back like a verdict. Then I exhaled slowly. Tomorrow. That night, sleep didn't bother visiting. I sat curled on my couch in my small apartment on the edge of Sacramento, city lights flickering beyond the blinds like faraway fires. The hum of traffic came through faintly, a constant low reminder that the world kept spinning no matter what burned inside yours. Clover, my gray tabby, pressed against my leg, purring softly. The sound was grounding, steady, innocent, unaware of the politics of human cruelty. I ran my hand along her back absently while my laptop glowed cold in the dark. I opened old messages, the ones I'd tried to forget. Mark. You're the smartest person in this department, but you could be smarter about how you talk to me. Mark. Dinner next week? Strictly professional. Mark. Don't make me remind you who signs your checks. Each line hit differently now. I remembered how my stomach had dropped when I'd first read them, how I'd rationalized every one of them to survive. That's what women are taught to do in offices like ours. Stay polite, stay strategic, stay quiet. I'd spent months performing calmness while my insides churned. But now, fear had calcified into something sharper. Precision. I plugged in my external drive. Folders appeared, neatly labeled, time-stamped. Every file was another layer of insurance I hadn't realized I'd need so soon. Screenshots, audio clips, recordings of video calls where his tone had shifted mid-sentence from professional to predatory. My digital trail of truth. The glow of the screen lit the room blue. My reflection in it looked composed, detached. I moved each file into a clean, encrypted folder and uploaded it to a private Google Drive. The progress bar crawled slowly across the screen, 10%, 40, 90, until it was done. At 2:11 a.m., I copied the link. The email I'd sent earlier to HR had been opened. I saw the little read indicator flicker to life. The following morning, Sacramento was washed in a cool brightness. I arrived early, the parking lot still mostly empty, air thick with that smell of asphalt and dew. Inside, the office lights buzzed faintly. Someone's toast burned in the break room, the scent mixing with cheap coffee and anxiety. Through the glass conference wall, I saw Mark straightening his tie, smirking at his reflection in the glass. He looked pleased, untouchable, 9 o'clock sharp. Janine from HR entered first, tall, gray suit, clipboard in hand, her expression carved from neutrality. Behind her came two from corporate legal, both carrying laptops. They didn't make small talk. They didn't need to. Mark turned, performing surprise. "Morning, everyone," he said smoothly. "What's this about?" Janine didn't smile. "Let's begin." I took my seat across from him. My heart beat slow, steady. The air conditioner hummed softly. Janine opened her laptop, projecting her screen onto the wall. A folder appeared. Its title glowed in pale blue text. Evidence submission, harassment claims. The first file opened. The room fell silent. A screenshot of one of his messages, 6 months old. The kind that left no room for excuses. Then another. His name, his words, his timestamp. Then a recording. His voice, unmistakable. He froze mid-breath. "This is taken out of context," he said finally, forcing a laugh. Janine's voice was calm, clinical. "We have full timestamps, Mark. Voice analysis matches your company account and credentials." He turned toward me then, eyes narrow. "You think this'll save your job?" "No," I said softly. "I think it'll show everyone what you did." For a moment, I thought he might actually say something else, but his jaw just tightened, a faint tremor in his hand. The arrogance cracked, replaced by something rawer, fear, maybe disbelief. The silence that followed was thick enough to feel. Not awkward silence, but heavy, like the weight of months of secrets finally breaking the air open. Janine's pen tapped once against her notebook. Then she said, "Marissa, you can step out for now. We'll follow up shortly." I nodded, collected my things, walked out. Outside the conference room, the office had gone still again. But this silence was different. People were pretending to work, eyes glued to screens, yet the tension was palpable. The news was already moving through whispers. As I passed, Erin glanced up. Our eyes met. She didn't look away this time. She mouthed one word. Finally. When I stepped outside, the sunlight hit me square in the face. The warmth felt unreal after 2 days under artificial lighting and humiliation. I stood there, eyes closed for a moment, breathing in air that didn't taste recycled. By noon, a company-wide email landed in every inbox. Subject: effective immediately, Mark D. has been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. It spread fast. The whispers turned into relief. The office chat lit up again, but this time I didn't read it. That night, another email arrived. Subject: temporary leadership adjustment. Body: Marissa, given your performance and ongoing project leadership, you will serve as interim manager until further notice. I stared at it until the lines blurred into soft white light. Then, for the first time in days, I laughed. It wasn't triumphant, just quiet, real. He had tried to humiliate me in front of everyone, so I showed everyone who he really was. He thought exposure would destroy me, but it only made me undeniable. The elevator doors opened the next morning with that familiar mechanical sigh, but the air that greeted me wasn't the same. The building hadn't changed. Same hum of the fluorescent lights, same faint smell of vanilla sanitizer and burnt printer toner. But something in the atmosphere had shifted. The silence wasn't icy anymore. It was charged, listening. I stepped inside and felt it immediately. Heads turned. Not all, but enough. A ripple of glances, cautious but not cruel. Erin looked up first from her corner desk, her hair pulled into that same messy knot. She didn't smile, just gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Across the room, Casey from Analytics lifted her coffee mug mid-sip and mouthed, "Nice earrings," like she needed a pretext to acknowledge me at all. Even Jay, who hadn't said more than 2 words to me in weeks, offered a quick half-smile before swiveling his chair away too fast. It wasn't friendliness, it was recognition, the kind that comes after people finally see something they've been pretending not to notice. I walked straight to my desk, set my bag down, and opened my laptop. My inbox was full, dozens of unread emails blinking at me like a line of waiting faces. The subject lines told the story for me. Quick sync request, budget approval. Need access to deck, thanks, congrats. Also, wow. Wow. That word said it all. It wasn't a congratulations. It was a collective exhale, a mix of admiration and discomfort. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, and only then did I realize how tight my hands felt. My knuckles ached. I'd been clenching invisible fists for days without even noticing. But now, the tension was starting to loosen. At 10:12 a.m., the Slack icon blinked. Janine, HR. Quick chat? Me. Sure. Conference C? Janine. On my way. I straightened my blazer, checked my reflection in the dark monitor, calm, neutral, and headed down the hall. The floorboards creaked beneath my steps, soft and steady. Janine was already waiting when I arrived. No laptop this time, just a thin, blue folder tucked under her arm. Her face was less formal than usual, but her eyes were alert. She gestured for me to sit. "We're starting formal proceedings today," she said quietly, taking the seat across from me. "Legal's reviewing everything." I nodded. "Okay." "They wanted me to let you know something." She opened the folder carefully, sliding a printed sheet across the table. It was a Slack transcript. I recognized it immediately, the same thread he'd posted, except this version was complete. Every message, every edit. Janine tapped her finger on the margin. "He didn't just share your texts, he altered them. Removed his own messages, changed the timestamps, made it look like everything came from you. My stomach tightened. And now? That's evidence tampering, she said. It's a policy violation, possibly criminal depending on the review. The room went still. I stared at the sheet, the black ink spelling out the manipulation I'd felt but couldn't prove. She paused, met my eyes. You didn't just protect yourself, Marissa. You uncovered a pattern. Her words landed heavy. Not praise, just truth. I traced the printed edge with my thumb. That feeling I'd been carrying for months, the paranoia, the self-doubt, suddenly made sense. It hadn't been in my head. It had been right there, under everyone's noses. Are there others? I asked quietly. Janine hesitated, then exhaled. There always are. They've started coming forward. By noon, the confirmation arrived. 2 women had already contacted HR. Their names appeared in an internal memo I wasn't supposed to see, but Janine showed me anyway. Vanessa, junior associate. Left last year, officially due to burnout. Kylie, marketing intern, barely 22. Both had stories, both had screenshots, both had stayed silent because that's what you do when survival feels easier than truth. Until now, I sat there for a long time after Janine left, my hands flat on the desk. The realization washed over me slowly. He'd done this before. He'd hurt others and walked away clean. My case wasn't an exception. It was a pattern finally catching up to him. Not this time. Later that afternoon, my name appeared in another meeting invite, this one from the chief operating officer himself. When I entered the room, Mr. Reynolds was already there. Gray suit, silver hair, eyes that looked tired but kind. He motioned toward a chair. "Marissa," he said, clasping his hands, "we've reviewed the material. Everything. Your documentation is extensive and, frankly, damning." I kept my gaze steady. I didn't do this to get promoted. "We know." His tone softened. "But the company can't ignore what you've done. You've handled yourself with professionalism and restraint. For now, you'll step into a leadership role, officially." I nodded once. Understood. He offered a faint smile, but I couldn't return it. It didn't feel like a victory. Not yet. It felt like a pause between storms. When I left the office that evening, the light outside was golden, the kind that makes everything look softer than it is. Cars hummed by on the street below, windows catching the sunset. The city looked peaceful, indifferent. At home, I moved through my apartment quietly. The space felt unfamiliar, though nothing had changed. Same black flats by the door, same chipped nail polish on my fingers, same reflection staring back from the dark TV screen. But something inside that reflection wasn't the same. For months, I'd lived with that whisper in my head. Don't speak too loud. Don't make waves. Don't give them a reason. It had shaped every word I'd said, every smile I'd forced. Tonight, that whisper was gone. In its place was silence. Heavy. Powerful. Mine. I sat on the couch, lights off, the city faint outside my window. Clover jumped up beside me, curling into a small gray ball, as if nothing in the world had changed. Maybe it hadn't. Maybe the world was just finally catching up to the truth. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of being heard. The investigation stretched on into its second week, and by then, the rhythm of the office had changed completely. It was quiet, but not the kind of quiet that trembles with fear. The kind that grows after a storm, when the debris has settled and everyone is still half afraid to move too fast. Mark's absence was both eerie and liberating. The hallways no longer echoed with his loud, performative laughter or the heavy sound of his shoes during those mid-morning walk-arounds he used to love. It was strange how quickly everything adjusted. The Slack channels went back to normal chatter. Coffee breaks came back. People laughed again, but it wasn't the nervous, watchful laughter it used to be. It was smaller, more natural. The tension that had lived under the fluorescent lights seemed to evaporate one quiet day at a time. No one talked about him out loud, but everyone knew. Everyone remembered. I didn't decorate his old office, didn't even step inside it after HR sealed it off for review. When the door was finally unlocked again, they offered it to me. Bigger desk, corner windows, a view of the skyline. I declined. I stayed at my desk near the window, the one I'd sat at since my first day. It wasn't glamorous, but from that spot, I could hear the faint hum of the city outside, the sound of buses braking at the intersection, a delivery truck backing up, a siren in the distance. It reminded me that the world kept going, that my story wasn't the center of it, just one thread in a much larger hum of survival. Because this wasn't about replacing him, it wasn't about occupying the space he left behind. It was about making sure no one ever had to shrink beneath a voice like his again. Every morning, new emails stacked up, project updates, calendar invites, budget adjustments. Work moved forward as it always does. But between those corporate necessities came something else, something quieter. Private messages from people I barely knew, people who'd been watching, waiting. Dev, thanks for what you did. We all knew something was off. Lucia, I used to dread one-on-ones with him. I thought it was just me. Kylie, you made me feel like I wasn't crazy. Thank you. Their words came without embellishment, without fanfare. They didn't call me a hero. They didn't say brave. They said relieved. They said safe. And somehow, that meant more. For the first time, people were beginning to talk about safety as something real, not just a policy buried in a handbook, but a pulse that kept the place alive. By the second Wednesday, the email arrived announcing the final hearing. Subject line, HR review, conduct resolution, Thursday 10th a.m. The names listed were heavyweights, corporate legal, HR director, COO, and Mark. I wasn't required to attend, they made that clear, but I wanted to. Not to testify, just to witness. The hearing was held on the 12th floor, far from our usual open workspace. That floor had always been quiet. No cubicles, just long glass corridors, white walls, and rooms that smelled faintly of paper and filtered air. I arrived early, the hum of the elevator fading behind me as I stepped into the wide corridor. My heels clicked against the tile, each step echoing. I found a seat near the back of the conference room where I could see but not be seen. When Mark finally walked in, 5 minutes late, he didn't look like the man who used to command rooms with ease. His tie was crooked, his hair uncombed. His skin looked gray under the LED lights. For the first time, he didn't scan the room for allies. He just stared straight ahead, avoiding everyone. They started the session promptly. No small talk, no preamble. The projector light flickered against the wall as the first slide appeared. Case overview, employee conduct and harassment review, Mark Donovan. Each bullet point felt like a nail in a coffin. Misuse of company communication channels, falsification of records, pattern of inappropriate conduct. Every example was time-stamped, documented, verified. The room stayed painfully silent, save for the soft clicks of the remote as slides advanced. My name appeared on some of them. My voice played in short audio clips, steady, calm, factual. It felt strange hearing myself that way. Detached, controlled. The version of me that existed purely to survive. Mark didn't interrupt, not once. He just sat there, eyes on the table, his hands gripping his knees like a man trying to hold himself together. But when the final slide appeared, when the words, pattern of misconduct confirmed pending termination, came up, he broke the silence. She knew what she was doing, he said suddenly, his voice strained but defiant. She baited me. A murmur rippled through the room. Janine's tone stayed cool. Are you saying you were coerced, Mr. Donovan? He leaned forward. I'm saying she knew how to manipulate. Something in me snapped at that. I hadn't planned to speak. I didn't even realize I was standing until I heard my own voice. I was silent for months, I said. My voice didn't shake. You chose what you sent. You cropped my messages. You laughed while I stood alone. That wasn't manipulation. That was survival. He blinked. Once. For the first time, he had nothing to say. Then one of the corporate lawyers leaned forward, her pen tapping against her notepad. For the record, Mr. Donovan, you were warned last year regarding similar behavior. Do you deny that? Mark's mouth opened, then closed. I I thought it was handled. The room was so still you could hear the hum of the air vent. It wasn't handled, and it wouldn't be. Not this time. Janine nodded to security. He was asked to step outside. His chair scraped softly against the floor as he stood. When the door clicked shut behind him, the stillness that followed felt final. Then the COO turned toward me. Would you like to make a final statement for the record? I thought for a long moment. The quiet buzzed in my ears. Then I nodded once. He thought he'd break my silence, I said. But it was the one thing that buried him. No one spoke after that. There was nothing left to add. When the hearing adjourned, I walked down the long glass corridor, past the security desk, and out into the lobby. The late afternoon light spilled through the tall windows, painting everything in gold. Outside, Sacramento shimmered, streets alive with motion, sky streaked orange and pink. I stopped near the doors and looked out. People rushed past the glass, laughing, talking, carrying coffee cups, completely unaware that my world had just shifted. Freedom doesn't arrive with noise or applause. It doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like stillness, like nobody watching you anymore, like finally being able to breathe without checking who's listening. 3 weeks later, the email arrived quietly, without ceremony. No signatures, no fanfare, just a few lines buried between project updates and policy reminders. Following the conclusion of our investigation, Mark Donovan's employment has been terminated, effective immediately. Thank you to all who participated in the inquiry. That was it. No apology from management, no dramatic announcement, just a line in an internal memo that felt almost invisible to anyone else. But to me, it was everything. I read it twice. Then again. My inbox glowed faintly against the morning light spilling through the blinds, dust motes drifting lazily in the air. The world hadn't changed, but something inside me had. It was done. That same morning, Janine stopped by my desk, folder in hand. Her tone was brisk, professional, but there was something softer in her eyes. The board reviewed everything, she said. They want to offer you the senior director role, effective immediately. Same title, same salary, same scope. I blinked. For a second, it didn't register. The same title that had once belonged to him. I smiled faintly. I'll take the title, I said, but I'm keeping my desk. Her brow lifted. Not the corner office? I shook my head. I work better by the window, closer to people, not above them. She nodded, almost relieved. I figured you'd say that. When she walked away, I turned back to my screen. The desk stayed mine. The work stayed mine. But the feeling? That was new. It wasn't the power that came with hierarchy or a new badge. It was quieter, steadier. It lived in smaller things. How I no longer lowered my voice in meetings. How I didn't flinch when a calendar invite came after 6 p.m. How I no longer said, "It's fine," when it wasn't. Power wasn't about volume. It was about not needing permission anymore. Every day, the office felt a little lighter. Conversations didn't pause when I walked by. People actually laughed in the lunchroom without glancing over their shoulders first. Even the air felt different, less stale, less watched. Erin dropped by one afternoon with her coffee. She leaned on my desk, casual, but I could see the gratitude in her smile. We were all holding our breath, she said quietly. Now it finally feels like we can exhale. I smiled back. Keep breathing. Because that's what this was, really. Not a triumph, not vengeance. It was air returning to a room that had been suffocating for too long. Over the next week, more people started to talk to me. Not about Mark, not even about the investigation, but about ideas, projects, things they'd been too cautious to bring up before. A kind of ease spread through the building, fragile but real. And every now and then, I'd catch someone glance at my screen while passing by, like they were trying to figure out how I'd done it, as if courage was a strategy document they could learn from. But it wasn't courage. Not really. It was exhaustion, the kind that builds slowly, year after year, until one day it sits on your chest and whispers, "No more." I didn't ruin him. I just stopped protecting him from the truth. That's what people don't understand. Silence doesn't mean safety. It just means the clock hasn't run out yet. One afternoon, as I was shutting down my computer, Janine reappeared. She stood by my desk, a faint smile playing at the edge of her mouth. "The new HR policy," she said, "about inappropriate communication. It's being named after your case file." I blinked. "Seriously?" She nodded. "The board insisted, said it changed how they handle everything." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. My throat felt tight, but not in the way it used to. I didn't thank her. I didn't cry. I just breathed. Because that was the real victory. Not the job, not the office, not even the vindication. It was the blueprint left behind, something permanent, something someone else could follow when the next storm came. If there ever was a next time. That evening, I packed my bag slowly. The office was nearly empty, the hum of the vending machine flickering in the distance. The smell of printer ink still hung faintly in the air. As I walked toward the lobby, I passed the same glass conference room where it had all begun, the place where I'd sat frozen while the world laughed behind screens. The light from the hallway spilled across the table, catching dust in golden streaks. It looked harmless now. When I stepped into the lobby, the glass doors reflected the sunset, a deep orange cutting between buildings, turning the city into silhouettes. I could see my reflection layered over it all. And suddenly, I thought of that morning. The one when he posted my messages. How my phone had buzzed nonstop. How the air had felt too heavy to breathe. How no one had dared to meet my eyes. Back then, I had felt like I was shrinking. Like my voice didn't matter. Like truth was too fragile to survive exposure. But now, when people looked at me, they saw something else. Not a victim, not gossip, not the office cautionary tale. They saw a woman who'd been humiliated in front of everyone and refused to vanish. I stopped near the doors, one hand on the cool glass, and watched the city glow beneath me. For a long time, I just stood there, listening to the quiet. Freedom didn't roar. It whispered. And for the first time in my life, I didn't need anyone to tell me I'd earned it. If this story struck a chord, hit like, subscribe, and tell me what you think in the comments.